Ambassador Munter, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure to be with you.
You played an important role as Southeast Asia is not an easy geography to work in,
Yes.
and you have waved through, the many challenges. Wanted to check with you when you talk about diplomacy, especially in the 21st century,
Yes.
as taking a different avatar, which is trying to promote economic empowerment, entrepreneurial empowerment to the, especially to the emerging world. How do you think the diplomats 21st century will be the ambassadors to promote these values?
Well, it's a good point you raise here. I think that there is a new diplomacy in the 21st century. And that new diplomacy is not necessarily something that traditional diplomats will carry out. That is to say, we look at the people in Open, for example, the entrepreneurs. They're going to be among the diplomats of the 21st century. Let's take the specifics of Pakistan and the United States. For many of the years, the last 6 decades, we've had a government-to-government relationship that's had its ups and downs, and during my time, some real difficulties. But the substance of the American-Pakistani relationship is much more than the way the governments deal with each other, much more than the issues of politics or of counterterrorism, important as they are. The issues of business, the issues of culture, the issues of education, the issues of philanthropy. These are the kind of things that diplomats will deal with, and those diplomats will be philanthropists, they will be entrepreneurs, they will be teachers. I think it's a very good way for us to move into the 21st century and make the relationship a stronger one.
So there are two acute needs that could be addressed through this initiative. Mm-hmm. One is the challenge of poverty.
Yes.
And by addressing the poverty, you address the need of violence or terrorism, etc. Because they have nothing, for lack of a better phrase, nothing better to do. Mm-hmm. They engage in these activities which are all antisocial.
Right.
So it is but the other challenge is for the local governments. They have, some of them have the will, some of them, have the will but don't have the resources and the means. Mm-hmm. How do you think US stands in a position to educate and empower the governments and the organizations to take on this job?
Well, again, I would focus more on the players who are taking part. It's not really the job only of government-to-government work to deal with questions like poverty. In Pakistan, for example, we were giving and continue to give $1.5 billion a year in civilian assistance with mixed results. I think seeing the strength of the United States and the strength of, say, Pakistan or other countries is to see the social and economic partnerships that can be built so that people, as you say, feel they have a hope and a stake in the future rather than turning to alternatives that are dangerous, like terrorism. And also that you have people feeling that the country in which they live is somehow legitimate, that it's a country that can deliver the services that allow you to lead a normal life, to raise your children, to have education. So there's a lot of interlocking issues here that are very, very complex. But the direction I think you're talking about it is the right one, which is that in the 21st century, diplomats are not just going to be people sitting in rooms talking about agreements. It's going to be societies engaging each other, whether it's the United States, Pakistan, or the people in the region. Let me add that I think the India-Pakistan relationship is going to be key in the future. India and Pakistan are natural partners, even though they have a history of difficulties. And what I would very much like to see is that Americans can help India and Pakistan have a rapprochement where investors are creating jobs for young men and women from Faisalabad. I think this is the way the future ought to be, and I'm optimistic it can happen.
Okay. When you look at economic empowerment clusters, mm-hmm. you'll see more, obviously, in India and less so in Pakistan. Mm-hmm. And then you compare the education levels, mm-hmm. The income levels.
Yeah.
Where do you think things could be a lot better? Mm-hmm. For countries like Pakistan and Afghanistan, mm-hmm. compared to in India or even Sri Lanka?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a symbiosis where things can work a lot better. Bureaucracy is much worse in India than in Pakistan. I think that there are certain advantages to business to be in Pakistan rather than India. I think that what we see here is that within the region there are various advantages and disadvantages to the different parts. For example, the bureaucracy in India is much worse than the bureaucracy in Pakistan. And yet the ability of India to reach out to the world is much more developed than Pakistan's more insular look. There are educated people in India who have links to the world that could be a benefit to Pakistan. So that rather than comparing the countries of who is able to help which country more, how can the countries find a symbiosis? How can they find advantages for both sides? I think the step-by-step measures that both countries are using, helping visas, helping people-to-people contacts, making it possible for the so-called negative lists to be lifted so that onions can go one way and cement can go the other way. These kinds of measures are the beginning of trust between Indians and Pakistanis that eventually can lead to the strengths of both countries. India's dynamism and size and openness to the world, and the Pakistani talent, which really up till now hasn't been exploited.
One of the fundamental elements of economic empowerment is a stable democracy.
Sure.
India is by far the largest democracy. We just are in the process of having elections, 1.2 billion people, without much of a problem. When US looks at the other emerging economies, do you think that trying to export our style of democracy hasn't worked in many places?
I think.
What is the best way then?
Right. I think the question of when you say trying to export our kind of democracy, if the message that people seem to see as America is lecturing, this is never effective. What I think we have to show is the proper respect to the traditions of the region, the kind of respect that people need in order to believe in themselves. I think what we need to see is that America shouldn't be in the role of going and being perceived as lecturing, and unfortunately that's been the case. People have seen America as trying to say, you should do it like us. Quite the opposite. I think what we need to do is show the proper respect to the countries about the things they have achieved, to be honest with them as friends, and quietly and firmly to say, this is where we see difficulties, and to try to build the kind of self-confidence which unfortunately in Pakistan is still lacking. I think that India is building self-confidence but still also has a ways to go. The best thing that the Western countries, United States included, can do is to show them the respect that I think they deserve and to be honest with them in a frank way, the way that friends should be.
Finally, when you look at the next generation, the emerging economies, the youth are very excited to participate in the global economy.
Yes.
They are at par or in some economies even better than our students here. Do you see a lot of hope for these next generation leaders to emerge from these huge young population?
Well, I hope so. I mean, it's a mixed bag. I mean, people who don't feel that they have opportunity can be very disheartened. And so there's quite a risk. You have so many young people, for example, in South Asia and Pakistan, who are at risk, people who need to have opportunity. If that kind of talent is harnessed, Pakistan working together with India as a South Asian power in economics can be extraordinarily powerful. And yet, let's be honest with ourselves, if nothing is done, you have a lot of people who don't have the opportunity and could turn the wrong direction. So it can cut both ways. An advantage if it's harnessed correctly, a real disadvantage if it's left to fester.
Do you see any good models out there that we can apply so that the maximum population percentage is part of this evolving economy?
Well, I think that we focus on opening up everyone to the rest of the world. Look at what India has been able to achieve since 1990 by putting behind it some of the more sclerotic and problematic elements of its structure. It's really opened up. Pakistan needs to do something similar, and only the Pakistanis can do this. They have to open up their society to the rest of the world, believing that they have the talent and the potential to become world beaters, which they do. But it's going to take a real effort from within to see these people come to the point that they deserve, where they're really world beaters. It's going to take some work.
Okay. I hope so, and thank you.
Thank you very much
for being here.
Thank you so much. Okay. Pleasure.